It's the holiday season, ladies and gentlemen. We've got Thanksgiving around the corner. Halloween's pretty much knocking on our door, so I figured why not make one of the most iconic desserts there is, which is a classic pumpkin pie from scratch. I'm Sebastian Regester, and this is Regester for Dinner, so stay tuned. If you're new to the channel, help spread some holiday cheer to the Regester for Dinner household by subscribing to my channel down below and hitting that little notification bell, and welcome to the RFD gang. Now let's get to baking. So I have here a medium-sized pumpkin that honestly you can pick these up at your local grocery store. They are meant for baking. These things are adorable. I took a knife, cut off the stem, cut it in half, removed the seeds and all that stringy fiber inside because you don't want that in your teeth because your girlfriend won't kiss you otherwise. And now what I'm gonna do is roast this in the oven set at 350 degrees for about 45 to 55 minutes. Be sure to not overcook the pumpkin. While you're roasting your pumpkins, I figured it's a perfect time to get started on your crust. So I have in this bowl 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour, and I'm gonna add a teaspoon of sugar and a teaspoon of salt, and we're just gonna wanna whisk this together until it's perfectly blended. And then I have 2 sticks of butter or a cup of butter. This is unsalted. You can use salted or unsalted. And I'm gonna add this into the all-purpose flour, and then using a pastry cutter, you're going to wanna break up the butter until small little pebbles start to form. The next step, after you get the little pebbles of butter formed, is to take anywhere between 1/4 cup to 1/2 cup of ice cold water and slowly start mixing in little by little, mixing in the dough with your hands until a baking crust dough like texture starts to form. So start off with 1/4 cup, and if you need more water, add more water, but don't add too much water, otherwise it's never gonna really form together and it's gonna be really hard to bake later on. After a couple minutes of mixing, you got yourself the perfect pie crust. So now it's time to portion this into 2 portions, wrap it in saran wrap, and chill in your fridge for over an hour. Alright guys, so my pumpkins are finally done. Pull them out of the oven, let them cool. You do want to work fast peeling off this skin. You can see that when you roast them properly, the skin does peel right off. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just transfer this over to my food processor, put on the lid, and you're gonna wanna puree this. As you can see, my pumpkin puree needs a little bit of help, so I'm gonna add some cold water to it just so it gets to that perfect puree-like consistency. Now that your pumpkin puree is made, it's time to get started on your pumpkin pie filling. So it's pretty simple. We're gonna take 2 large eggs, crack them into a bowl, beat the hell out of them. To that, you're gonna wanna add your pumpkin puree filling, which should honestly make about 12 to 15 ounces if you use a medium-sized baking pumpkin. Next, you'll want to add 3/4 cup of granulated sugar. And this plethora of spices, I have 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of ground ginger, 1/4 teaspoon of ground clove, and 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. And we're just going to want to whisk this all together. And then over here in my measuring cup, I have 12-ounce can of evaporated milk, and I'm going to slowly start to add that while I'm mixing it together. And yes, don't worry, this is going to make the filling very liquidy. However, when it starts to bake, you'll see that it starts to really tighten up in the actual pie crust itself, so don't freak out. All right, we're going to want to let this sit while we get moving on to the next portion, which is the pie crust. Alright, so now we've got to roll out the pie crust. So I went ahead and lightly floured the cutting board. And what I'm going to do is just roll it out, and every couple inches, I'm going to just roll it out with the rolling pin just so it achieves the perfect circular pie crust shape. And you want to make this slightly bigger than the actual pie pan that you're going to be cooking in your pumpkin pie in. And don't worry if the sides start to crack because that's just extra dough. And best thing is if it starts to stick to the cutting board, add a little bit more flour. Alright, and I just rolled the pie crust onto my rolling pin, and that's just so that I can easily roll it on top of my baking dish. Make sure to pack it down so it fits around the edges. Okay, and as you can see, I successfully managed to put this pie crust into the pie pan, and I'm just taking my index and my thumb, and I am just squeezing the dough a little bit, and it's okay, it will rip just slightly, but it will just help give it a nice little pretty design around the edge of your pie. And luckily, if it rips, you do have a little bit of extra dough that I managed to scrap on the sides that you can use to fill in those little tears. It's time to get baking, guys. I have my pumpkin pie mixture, and I'm gonna go ahead and pour it into my crust. And you're gonna wanna fill this in, honestly, it's the perfect amount. Just pour it all in there. Now we're gonna place this in my oven set at 425 degrees for about 15 minutes, turn the heat down to 350 degrees and finish the cooking for about 40 to 50 minutes or so. You know we cook the best pumpkin pie in town when there's no cracks on top. But just like that, we're done with yet another episode of Regester for Dinner, and I'm your host, Sebastian Regester. If you enjoyed today's video, can't wait for us to cook something else up, make sure you smash that like button, comment below, and subscribe. But until next time, stay hungry, my friends. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize in advance. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to take a bite, but then I realized, well, we've got to do a taste test here at Regester for Dinner. So this pie has been cooling for about 2 hours now, but if you don't want to eat it right away, you can always place it in your fridge and enjoy it tomorrow. But without further ado, let's taste this bad boy. Get a little whipped cream. I can smell the cinnamon. Oh. Nothing beats a homemade pie, am I right? Comment below whatever your favorite pie is.